Okay, so what is landscape? Landscape is terrain generated from inside of a proprietary engine, namely where you're working with Unreal Engine. You can go about creating a landscape by going here in this modes tab and going to landscape. And here you get this new menu right here popping up. You can create just a normal flat landscape, which you can then later sculpt on top of, or you can actually import from a file. Now, some of the settings here you're going to notice are like section size, components, number of components, and then overall resolution. So, what the quads are is each of these tiny little squares inside of this much larger grid. So if I change these things like 255, it adds more of these quads. So basically, it's like adding geometry to this landscape. The components are each one of these little grids. So you can actually add more if you want to, and it's not cropped or not cropped, not constrained. So you can actually do multiple ones on different grids. So maybe you can have more of like a rectangular shaped landscape if you want. And then this, of course, will change the resolution on the fly. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to just import one. So I've already put it in, but to get a landscape, you need to have a special type of a height map. It's not the normal ones that you can get from like Megascans or any other program or any other like online store or create something. You have to create a, in a sense, raw file of the height information because this is going to be a very, very large landscape. It's going to be about probably 4 kilometers. So a normal height map, which is in 8-bit color, is not going to have the valuations of height information that we need. We need 16-bit height maps, and Unreal Engine accepts about 2 to 3 different forms. One is, of course, a PNG, but PNGs can be a little expensive with the uncompression rates. So there's two types of other files. One is a .raw, which is, of course, a raw file, which you can get exported out from whatever program you're using. I was using, to make this mountain range, I was using a program known as World Machine. But you can also export out a .r16, which is another form of a raw file. They tell you what the height map resolution is, and you're gonna notice that, like, the resolution is not a normal power of 2 texture size. It's because, because it's such a very large and kind of dynamic asset, it needs to have its own type of compression that's no different than how we handle, like, textures and compression, in normal parts of assets. So one of the one of the things that they talk about is the height map information. Why it's using in these weird, odd and not power of two types of resolutions is because it uses little endian byte order. Um, I'm not much of a computer science guy, but from what my research came about is they used the little endian byte order to help with a different type of compression so that having something this big, this large, and have this much information stored in it, because once I start making this, each one of these grids has to somehow hold uh, textures and MIP data in it. And if you have like a ton of these like components, it's going to be very, very expensive right off the bat. So actually, I want to change some of the component sizes. So we've lowered the component size a bit. Okay, let's do fit to data. There we go. So now we have our component size, but we now fit all of our information onto this grid. So if you already have a landscape material, you can actually go about applying it in here, but we're going to create ours from scratch. So also remember this number right here, this 4336 number. So let's import it in. It's going to take a little bit to process it. And boom, we have our landscape. And let me show you guys how big this landscape is. So I have a player start. Let me figure out it's like right here. So let's hit play. See how far he has to drop just to even get over here? It again, it's a 4 kilometer by kilometer landscape. In a sense, this is kind of like Skyrim or Fallout 4 in terms of size to get from one end to the other. But this is just one entire mountain range. You can use terrain data. You can actually go to like certain places like the U.S. Geological Survey, and I think there's ways that other artists have found that could compress and export out topographical map data and export as a height map so that you can actually reuse it if you'd like. So now that we've created our terrain, let me show you a few things with when it comes to a landscape. So I'm gonna go in here. Let's make a landscape underscore map. Let's delete this one. This was the test one I had created already. Landscape underscore embed. Okay, so let's start bringing in some textures. I created a couple other textures to be used as an overall type of asset. Um, when you make like landscapes and stuff, uh, you try to figure how to use the landscapes in different ways. One way people use landscapes, or even in the programs like in World Machine, they use these to create vistas. And a vista is like geometry and texture information that is either saved inside of a skybox texture or used in conjunction with a skybox texture to create those far off visuals of like in a sense far off places. Like if you ever play games like Destiny and stuff where you can actually look and see like beyond the playable area, there's like other castles or there's other places that you looks like you can go to if you keep walking further enough, but really it's just really far off geometry and texture information. So what I've done is I've created two textures. I've created a normal map and I've also created a splat map, which a splat map is kind of like our ORM map, but what this one is it takes the RGB information and it splits it in areas that you could use for placing textures. So this would be an area for snow. This would be like an area for grass or dirt. Same thing here. This is most likely be for rock, but it's a channel packed texture that you can reuse. So I'm gonna go and toss this inside of our base color, and then I'm gonna take this one and put it in our normal map. Let me hit apply. Now let me go to our landscape. And let me hit, actually, let me go do one thing. Is our materials, there we go. Landscape, there we go. Let me create an instance real quick. You can actually create an instance material out of this. A long time ago in older versions, you weren't really able to create an instance material out of it because of certain limitation issues, but they've now fully made it able to do something like that. So let me take this instance material and plug it in. My nope, not that one. There we go. And you're gonna see you got this really weird moray effect because what's happening is this landscape is so big that it's tiling this texture so many times, and that's because we haven't, of course, applied our tiling yet. Now, landscapes require a certain type of landscape, like a coordinate system, and you can't use normal UV texturing. Even though there technically is UVs, we're not using a UV'd model. We're using a generated mesh in a sense. So Unreal Engine has created their own system for it. So you just start typing in landscape, and you use this one landscape layer coordinates. Plug this guy into where you would put your UVs. And then this is what you would handle when it comes to scale. You can do rotations, you can do pans, which are offsets basically. Let me try and hit 1. Now let's hit save. Let's see how that works. Doesn't really change much. And that's because this map is huge. It needs to not just tile one time. How the landscape system works is the UV system is inverted to how we normally handle UVs. So the lower the number is not how big the texture is going to show up. It's going to be the complete opposite. When it's at 1, it means it's just showing one single size and it's going to be repeating over and over again. That number I told you guys about, the 4336 for the resolution, that is the number that you have to put in. Whatever your landscape resolution is, that's the one you have to put in. Also, be very aware is when you are generating textures through in whatever way, you must make sure that the resolution of your map is the same. So like if one of these guys is not 4090, if one of these guys is 4096, but one of them is 4097, it's going to be off. So this one's 4097, and so is this guy. They're both set to the same 4097 resolution just because they have to match if we overlay them on the height information. But maybe we don't really want this. We want to maybe add our own types of textures to it. So what I can start doing is first let me go here and let me start bringing in some textures that we're going to use. We're going to create in a sense, a painting system for this guy. So let's go in and let me grab some textures real quick. Let's add some, actually, no, let's go to the starter content. Let's go to the textures for here. So let's apply some grass. Let me take some gravel as well. Actually, no, I'll use the gravel for something else. Let me use, hmm, good one. Actually, no, yeah, no. We'll use rock slate. There we go. So let me take these guys and let's plug them into here. Start moving these guys and organizing them a little bit. So this is going to be our first layer. This is going to be our second layer. And then this is going to be our third layer. But what I'm going to do is this, I want to have this for snow, kind of. So I'm going to do a vector 3 of, actually, no, we're not going to do pure white. Let's do 0.9. Snow is not purely white by considering the fact that snow naturally is a reflective material. It takes on a lot of colors from the surfaces around it. So it's not going to have a pure white color. So we have our 3 layers. Next, what we'll do is, let's see. Okay, so the next thing we have to do is we need to start figuring out how to create layers for this guy when it comes to the landscape. And to do that, let's go into here again. And you have to use this one, a landscape layer blend. And you have this node that pops up, but there's nothing to input stuff in. And that's because you have to go in here where it says layers and start adding in layers. So let's add in 3 layers. Let's start naming them. So our first one's going to be grass. That's the one thing that you have to always define. You have to define grass, or you can keep it simple. You can just say layer 1. So it doesn't just say grass on it. Layer rock. And then our third one is going to be snow. And what all these ones are saying is this is going to be your blend type. So this is how you handle blending things. So right now we're doing weight blending. And what weight blending basically is it's just applying a simple paint over. Think of it like if there's no textures, each one of these values is either going to be a 0 to 1 paint. So you're just going to paint a little bit more over um, each one. So you can say like paint like 0.5 at first, and they're only going to show half up. And then whenever you put one of these, guys is at like 1, it's going to fully paint over all the other ones. It's just the same as like you're painting alpha information. If you change this, you can do height blends if you are using an alpha channel texture. And what that will do is if you have an alpha channel texture, it tries to figure out how to blend properly with an alpha channel as well. The same thing with our height blend. If you do a height blend, you actually get a second slot to handle height information when you're blending. This is really good if you really want to have textures to have height application to it. Like in certain cases, if you set your height input here, like maybe we want our grass to be like 0.4, and then we want our rock to be like 0.1, and then for our snow, we want it to be like 0.9. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of defining height, like an actual height to it. So whenever I paint snow, using the snow's height information is going to blend over the grass and the rock. And then the grass would do the same thing for the rock itself. And the rock will never overlap any of the other layers. But we're not doing a height blend in this case. We're just doing a weight blend. So let's start applying some things. So like in our case, we have to apply each one of these guys as this is going to be our albedo layer blend. And then we're going to have a second one for our normal map. And then, of course, you can actually go in further and apply a third one, but we don't have any ORM or roughness textures for these guys. Also, how you would handle like an ORM texture, because you can't just apply this like 6 or 7 times. The easiest way is, you plug in your ORM maps to where they're supposed to be. And then what you'll do is you will also apply a breakout. And what breakout is it takes a single, in a sense, a single RGB, like one of these guys, and it breaks it out into its 3 separate channels. That way you can do your O, your R, and your M. So let's go back here. We've already added our snow. Now let's do the same thing with our normal map. Oh, didn't plug the right one in for the grass. Now let's plug that into our normal map. Into our base color. Actually, let's do a, where is it at? Trying to find, we have this special node you can use to combine to normal information. Not flat, normal. We'll just do a multiplication application for this guy. This way we can take both information and they both get applied together. In a sense, this would be, this is what you would call a broad normal. So let's go back in, let's hit save. and we'll take a look. And as you can see, it's kind of coming off as very weird, and it's because we don't have our UV set for these guys. We have to apply UVs for them as well. In our case, we don't want them to have the same exact UVs because we don't want to have a single tiling value for this. So let's set to like 100. Actually, no, this is going to be an instance. So let's set this to 1. And to handle landscape coordinates, like I said before, the landscapes are inverted compared to when you handle UV tiling. So in our case, we're not going to use a multiplication because if you try and do multiplication, you're going to be getting a lot of integers to try and scale down your tiling. So in our case, we want to use a divide, but we do the same exact thing as we normally do UV tiling. Let's set our value to 1 at first. Now let's apply our UVs to these guys. And like I said, I'm not going to be doing anything with this one's UVs, considering that we want it to already fit the we want it to fit the landscape itself. So if we wanted to just change on the fly and use this over and over again, what you can do is you can do the same thing and apply a second UV and just say this is our broad normal tiling, and then you would just adjust that to the resolution of your landscape. So let's hit save. And now the other thing we also need to do is let's go back into our landscape is we now need to define our painting layers because we just made layers. Now we need to make sure they're defined here. Layer blends, here are rock and grass blends. There we go. So make sure you hit save. So by default, since the material is already applied to the landscape, it's going to figure, hey, there's actual information here. So what you need now is you need to have layer data. And these guys don't have any information right now. You have to define it. So you have to create one of these two layer informations. If you're using the height or alpha one, you would use one of these non-weighted blends because it knows not to handle it with just simple paint over information. So let's do our weight blend and let's throw these into our materials. And this is what you could do is you can actually create a secondary landscape and then just create some layer info and then just reapply that information when you're painting again. So let's do the same thing for our rock. And of course, also by default, it's going to choose whatever the first layer is as your main layer blend. So in our case, it's the grass. So let's go in here. And we, of course, already have our normal map applied. So now let's go in and you just select one of these guys. Like say, let's start doing some rock. And it takes a little bit at first because it's your first time painting on it. Oh, we did not define the tiling yet for our instance material. So let's go in here and let's set it to 100. There we go. Now that looks a lot better. So now we can start painting some rock on here. See, we have our rocks normal map applied as well. Now let's start applying some snow. And since it's the first time you're painting it, it does the same thing as well. Now, you're also going to notice you're going to have this very weird type of stretching. That's how it's always going to be. It for some reason, um, it's trying to figure out your proper size when you're creating a landscape. So don't be very wary of this. It's again, it's only something that's noticeable if you go to the edge. But in most cases, when you're creating a landscape like this, you will never ever reach that kind of spot. you can always just go in here and um, do some management. You can actually delete these spots if you want, or the next time when you're creating your landscape. From what I've been told is, if you do a fit to size and it says like 17 by 17, they said just delete one of those numbers. So do 16 by 16, and that's supposed to delete uh, this row of stretched kind of diffuse information. But essentially, that is a basic landscape instance material so that you can throw this on any other material and then just again you can even go further. You can apply two more, three more, four more layers of color information if you want to. Just up to you, but just remember there's going to be limitations to how many textures you probably can use before it gets too expensive for your production.